Hello and welcome to our very first episode of Really. This is the show that discusses those big questions about life, death, grief and hope. I'm Steve Game-Blackmoor. I'm your host for today. From time to time I'll be joined by co-host Kim Hargreaves.
Hello.
And we'll be accompanied by a special guest. And I'll be talking with Jo Goodwin-Worton today. Jo is a listed grief specialist and she's written 2 books about her journey in grief after losing her husband Jay. Just a little about me. To cut a very long story short, I'm a listed grief specialist who also happens to officiate funeral ceremonies around Staffordshire and Cheshire. In total, I suppose I've been doing this for about 24 years now, and I have a few stories to share with you along the way. Kim, incidentally, was once a crematorium manager, and she can share a few interesting stories I can tell you. So coming up on today's first episode, can you really love your cat more than you can love your husband? And we'll be discussing the nature of grief, some of which will resonate with you, I'm sure. All this coming up on Really, the show that discusses those big questions. Today's big question is grief. Kim and I know each other incidentally. She officiates funerals too in North Staffordshire.
I do indeed.
Welcome,
Thanks, Steve,
Kim.
a while. Yeah, thank you.
Prior to that, I do know that you worked as a crematorium manager, didn't you, Kim?
I did.
Tell us a bit about that.
Okay, well, what do you want to know? It was a fascinating role. I came to it from working at a university, so completely different background, but oddly enough, quite similar challenges in some ways. So, management, staff, that sort of thing. But also, I think the key point was you're dealing with people on the worst day of their life. So a lot of emotions and a lot of things can go wrong, and some things did. So yeah, all sorts of shenanigans involved, but nothing illegal.
So why the change in career then?
Oh, well, that was an interesting one. It actually started one day. I was at work and I had a bit of a headache. And so I went for a lie down in the crematorium and I didn't feel any much better. So I thought, well, I'm going to go home for the day. Going to go and see how I am. The next day I woke up, still really bad headache. And I went to the doctor and they took my car keys and phoned an ambulance. And it turned out I had a cerebral leak. So I had brain fluid leaking out of my brain, out of my nose and my ears and everything.
That must have been scary.
It was horrible. But unfortunately what was worse was they then realised it was to do with a lymphoma. So I was diagnosed with indolent lymphoma. They couldn't really do anything to treat it, still can't, but I'm living with it well. And at the time I thought, well, do I want to travel every day from Stoke to Wolverhampton and back? Or do I want to, have a little bit more of a quality of life? Because, this explained a lot as to why I was so tired all the time, etc., that sort of thing. So after being off sick for quite some time, and I have to say Wolverhampton Council were very supportive of that, in the end I did decide to take redundancy due to ill health. So. And then I thought, well, what can I do? What do I know a lot about? I thought, well, I've seen about 5,000 funerals a year, so I reckon I could have a go at that.
Do you enjoy it?
Love it. Absolutely love it. Sounds a weird thing to say, doesn't it? We talk about funerals, but yeah, absolutely love it. It's a real privilege, I think, and you only get one go at it. So when you meet a family, you get to be part of a really intimate proceeding for them. You get to be part of something which they're going to remember for the rest of their lives, and something so profound. And as I say, you only get one chance. If you get that funeral wrong, then that's it. For the rest of their life, they're going to remember you're the person who, for want of a better word, buggered up their loved one's funeral. And no one wants that.
What did you say? This is Hearsay.
Chris from North Staffordshire, she writes in and she says, I lost my husband in 2020 and I find myself constantly looking for connections, things and people who I feel I have a connection with. She says, I feel closer to him by keeping in touch with the people he was last in touch with. Is this normal to feel this way, she asks. Well, Chris, thanks for writing in, and yes, I would say that's pretty normal and understandable. It resonates with me. Do you know, the daft thing is, as a funeral celebrant, I feel like I have a connection with the chapel attendant and crematorium staff who were on duty on the day of my dad's funeral. And of course I see them regularly. I don't know, I suppose they were the last people to be with him. Chris, you keep on making those connections. It's so easy for us to feel isolated when we're grieving. And I'm a big believer, if it helps you, it helps you. And if you find solace in those connections, in making those connections, then surely that's a good thing, isn't it? I know I value those connections. So thanks, Chris. I hope you found that helpful. Keep listening. I have something for you to listen to a little later on. June in Cheshire, she wrote in, she says, I saw your posts on Facebook about the cat, and people think I'm silly, but recently I lost my cat Timmy. I'm really struggling with that. He was my companion for over 15 years. She writes, he's been my pal through some really awful times. I've also lost my husband in 2015, and as much as I miss him dearly, I feel like I'm missing Timmy more right now. Is that normal? Is it right to feel that way, she asks? Well, June, Kim and I were chuckling over that post we put on Facebook about the cat the other day. She's a cat lover. And I jokingly asked her, it sounds like you love your cat more than you love your husband. Is that right, Kim? And she says, of course I don't. But she imagines losing her cat will be pretty devastating nonetheless when it happens. June, I sense you're feeling a little guilty about how you're feeling. You might feel like you're somehow dishonouring the love you had for your husband. I don't see it that way at all. I have a rottie called Bella, and I dread the day that she goes, but I wouldn't say I dread that more than the day I lose my wife if she goes before me. We form a very close bond with our pets, and I'd say grieving their loss will be no less devastating than perhaps losing someone very close to us. We grieve, you see, because we love. So I'm going to bring in Jo at this point. Hi, Jo. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks very much.
Now, is there a right or wrong way to grieve? What's your thoughts on that?
I don't think there is, because we all grieve differently. And there's a saying which I love, which is, grief is the price we pay for love. And that's quite poignant when you think about it, and in general, but also to me personally. My life has been full of love, and I wouldn't change that for an absolute second. Now, yes, I have experienced grief and great sadness, but the memories I have and the love I've had, I feel absolutely privileged to have experienced that level of love in my life.
So, do you come from a religious background? Are you religious?
Well, my family's Belgian and they are Catholic. And as a girl I was confirmed and, did all the sort of the church stuff. But I'm not really religious, I have to say. I don't believe in a monotheistic patriarchal God. So, yeah. But no, I'm not religious.
Just rewinding a little bit to something you said early on, Jo, about, I think it was the Queen that said it, that grief is the price we pay for love.
With great love, there is grief. But let's face it, no one wants to grieve.
No, that's right.
It's not an emotion that we welcome into our lives and that we want to experience.
Yeah.
Yet, there is one thing we know for certain, and that's that people die. And at some point in our lives, we will experience the loss of someone we love or someone we know, whether that be a friend, family member, a colleague, or an acquaintance.
Isn't it? It is, yeah.
What do you believe?
Oh, God. Do you know what? I don't know anymore. I really don't know anymore. And that sounds a really, really rubbishy thing to say. But I have had a couple of odd experiences. Obviously, being close to death for quite a long time, you do sort of, I don't know, you do kind of leave part of yourself behind sometimes when you're very sick. I hesitate to think that it all ends. I don't know. I really do want to believe there's something else, because it doesn't make sense that there isn't. However, I don't believe that we're any different than any other animals on this planet. I don't believe that we're anything special compared to, I don't know, slugs or foxes or whatever.
Just so that the listeners know, Jo and I first met each other in 2019. I was invited to officiate her husband's funeral, Jay. And since then, Jo, you've written a book caring for cancer, all about your journey, caring for Jay. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the book actually started as a diary, and each day I would write down all of the emotions and the feelings that were happening, both after Jay's diagnosis and throughout the treatment, but also when Jay passed away and the months that followed. Now, the book is real because it's my real words, which means at the time when I was writing them, they were incredibly raw, but also incredibly honest. And I wanted people to read the real journey and to hear what it's like when the doors are closed at night. So don't get me wrong, it wasn't all sadness, believe it or not. We had some incredibly funny times.
Yes, I remember talking about them at the funeral.
Yeah, there were, and people, think it's all sadness, but we actually had some of the funniest times during that period of time. And, we would smile, and sometimes we laughed till we just cried with laughter. But that's the nature of grief, both before and after somebody dies. There's going to be times when you smile, and there's going to be times when you may cry, and when you have that moment of reflection and remember the happiest of memories. So this book is a journey through all of that emotion, but ultimately it's a book of hope and finding your way through grief.
Got nothing on my mind, nothing to remember. I got nothing to forget, nothing to regret. But I'm all tied up on the inside. No one knows quite what I've got, what I used to be on the outside. What I used to be, I'm not anymore. I've heard about people like me, never seem to make connections. They walk a road to set them free, find they've gone the wrong direction. But there's no need for turning back, 'cause all roads lead to where I stand. I believe I'll walk them all, no matter what I may have planned. Can you remember who I was? Can you still feel it? Can you find my pain? Can you heal it? So lay your hands upon me now, and cast this darkness from my soul. You alone can light my way. You alone can make me whole once again. We've walked both sides of every street, through all kinds of windy weather, but that was never our defeat. As long as we could walk together, but there's no need for turning back, 'cause all roads lead to where we stand. And I believe we'll walk them all, no matter what we may have planned.
So, I don't know, maybe there's afterlife for all of us.
Yeah, interesting. It begs the question, is this all by chance then, or is it by choice?
Now, it's the intelligent design, isn't it, question again. I think it might be all by chance, but to me, that is really reassuring. Because if you think about it, if it's all by chance, then you've got no pressure. maybe there is no punishment for being a bad person, only your own morality. And there is no karmic punishment. There's no rule to it. So all you have is your own life and your ability to be a good person in this life if you want to be. So yeah, talking about karmic belief, it's more a question of understanding that within this universe that you have a place, and that, I don't know, maybe we're more like pebbles that you drop into a pond. Maybe each of us is our own little pebble in a little pond, and all the ripples that come out affect everyone around you. And so if you make a great big splash and upset everything around you, it's going to be, you're going to get worse things happening to you. I don't know.
That reminds me of an interesting quote by the comic writer Terry Pratchett.
Oh, love Terry. Terry.
Oh, it's fantastic.
He's ace, isn't he? Well, he was.
I wouldn't believe. I mean, probably wouldn't describe himself as a philosopher.
No, but he was, really, wasn't he? He was fantastic.
Absolutely. And he wrote in The Reaper Man that in the Ramtop village, where they dance the real Morris dance, for example, they believe that no one is finally gone until the ripples they cause in the world die away. Until the clock he wound up winds down, till the wine she made has finished its ferment, till the crop they planted is harvested. The span of someone's life, they say, is only the core of their actual existence.
That's gorgeous.
Terry Pratchett.
Yeah, that's probably sunk in somewhere with the whole ripple thing. I would probably owe that to that description, because I certainly read Reaper Man since I was a kid. But he also says it in the, is it Going Postal, or the one with the, it's the one where they have the Clacks Towers.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I don't know what that one's called, but it's the one where he says as long as a man's name is spoken along the wire, he never dies.
We want to hear your thoughts, so drop us a line to reallyshow.pod@gmail.com, and maybe, just maybe, your thoughts will make the next episode.
What I found quite remarkable, though, Jo, is how you handled things after Jay died. I think the listeners would be fascinated. Would you mind sharing some of that?
I mean, after Jay died, it's obviously your world is very dark, and you have no idea how you're going to react after a day, a week, and quite frankly, looking past a week, you can't do it. You just can't do it because you're almost overwhelmed by your grief. But I think after the funeral, I kind of sat there and went, I want to do something with his life.
Yeah.
Even though he wasn't here anymore, I wanted his life to mean something. So I took a massive leap of faith. Everybody thought I was crazy, but I did it anyway and left my job, and I went back to university to study a degree in psychological studies. And that has been so far a 4-year journey, which has led me to today. And it's been a long journey, but it's been so worthwhile, and I feel incredibly privileged to do what I do, and using my grief to help others is what I've always said since day one.
Absolutely. So for you, have things got back to normal, or is there a back to normal?
That's a really good question, because no.
I mean, Jo, I think you should know, listeners, that Jo's also written another book, which very recently been released, available on Amazon, by the way, both books. And it's called Back to Normal, asking that question, isn't it? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that book?
Yeah, I mean, after Jay died, so many people used to say to me, and in a really nice way, don't get me wrong, you'll get back to normal soon. Oh, you'll be over it soon.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
Yeah. And it used to drive me crazy, because you don't go back to normal after a bereavement. So I think you almost find a new normal. And when I was writing this book, I was very, very lucky to talk to some inspiring people who agreed to share their story with me. And the stories in the book, they're very, very varied and very different, but they're all about loss and or bereavement, and the way that they coped with their own loss, grief or bereavement in their own words. And they're incredibly empowering, but also incredibly heartwarming. And it takes you through their journey. and asks the question throughout the book, do we ever go back to normal? And again, my answer is no, you don't go back to normal. Instead, we find a new normal and a way of living alongside our grief or loss. So you don't really move on after grief. You move forward in a way that feels right to you. And the book talks about the importance of finding your own meaningful steps forward and knowing that it's your journey and therefore there's no right or wrong. Just follow your heart and what feels right. What is important and what I want everybody to know is that there is support out there and there are people that will listen. So it takes a really, really strong person to ask for help.
Yeah, it does. And you've also, in addition to releasing 2 books, started up a new business, a new service called Seeds in Time. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I feel incredibly privileged to offer support to other people, and being able to offer grief and bereavement support to others. I feel that I'll never understand what they're going through because it's that person's unique journey, but I do feel that I can relate to it. So when people talk to me about the pain of grief, both physical and emotional, I get it. They don't need to explain it, I just get it. And I think that's the quality I can bring to that because it's real lived experience at the end of the day.
For professional grief, bereavement and loss support, visit seedsintime.co.uk. That's seedsintime.co.uk.
I think the idea, speaking something into existence is the whole theory behind postmodernist thinking, isn't it? When you think something is, it becomes. And even if you go back to René Descartes, I think, therefore I am. That was his whole sort of idea behind it. But when it comes to theology, I always come back to the voice and who is the voice. If something has to be said into existence, who's doing the saying? And I don't know if there is a voice out there.
Is death the end of it? Or is there more? Do our endings transform into new beginnings? What do you think?
Well, I actually have an interesting thought about this. So I got into mushrooms recently.
Right.
Not the way you're thinking.
Oh, right.
More in that the idea, it's probably from watching too much Star Trek. The most recent Star Trek series, I think it's the new one with the female captain.
Oh, yes,
yeah.
yes.
I can't remember what it's called, but it's they have this whole sort of complicated thing about the mycellular or mitochondrial network, which is about a sort of fungus that they use tardigrades to sort of fly around on. They're connecting the universe between universes between us. I've described it in the worst possible way imaginable, so sorry to any Star Trek people, but that's the general gist of it. And I was thinking, this planet is the oldest species on this planet are fungus. And this entire planet appears to be covered in a whole layer of mushrooms, like under the surface, a whole layer of fungi. And what if it is, when you're buried, you somehow are tuned into this level?
How interesting.
Isn't it just?
Yeah.
And I thought, and enough for me to say, I actually don't want to be cremated. Just in case, I'm going to sound mad now, just in case I will actually become part of the mushroom network.
Fantastic. You've got a point.
I know, right? No one's ever thought of the mushrooms. Whether you have a consciousness as a singular entity anymore, I don't know. But why not? We're supposed to sort of go into the ground, aren't we? We're supposed to die, and where we fall, we just become... we get eaten, we become mulched, we all sort of, we rot and we become part of the earth again. What if that's the natural way? What if unconscious lives on within the earth? What a fantastic idea.
It's a subject, though, isn't it, that raises so many questions.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll be discussing all of them, you and I, on this show over the coming months. I promise you.
Exciting.
Excellence is never an accident. It is always the result of high intention, sincere effort, and intelligent execution. It represents the wise choice of many alternatives.
Everyone must leave something behind when he dies, my grandfather said. Child, or a book, or a painting, or a house, or a wall built, or a pair of shoes made, or a garden planted, something your hand touched in some way so that your soul has somewhere to go to when you die. And when people look at that tree or that flower you planted, or perhaps even a mushroom, you're there. It doesn't matter what you do, he said, so long as you change that something from the way it was before you touched it into something that's like you after you take your hands away. Isn't that fabulous?
That's amazing.
Was Plato right, I wonder? Everything that becomes or changes must do so owing to some cause, for nothing can come to be without a cause. And so that's it for our first show. I sincerely hope you found that helpful. In our next episode, we'll be discussing life after death. Is there a life after death? And we'll be talking to a medium who will be sharing their thoughts on that subject.
You've been listening to Really? Published by Spotify and sponsored by Last Rights Limited.